Karen's son returned my wedding dress. My future mother-in-law definitely has a personality. I don't know if it's a good personality, but it's a personality. She's been involving herself in our wedding plans a lot, and my fiancé always takes his mother's side. That's bad enough, but he really crossed the line when he returned my wedding dress because his mother didn't like it. Now he's insisting I wear the dress she picked out for me, even though it's not my type. My fiancé and I are getting married in December. His mom is the intrusive type, but she's nice overall, and we somewhat get along. I hate to admit that wedding planning has been an absolute nightmare. His mom wasn't willing to agree on most things, and my fiancé said that since he's her only son, then I should respect and appreciate this vision she has for the wedding and how it should be. She insisted on coming along for the wedding dress shopping. I took her with me and my mom and friends. I was so lucky to have found what I was looking for, but she picked a dress that she liked so much and said that she always pictured her son's bride in it. My mom and my friends thought this line was creepy. I thought the dress itself was somewhat creepy and totally not my type. I apologized and thanked her for her vision, but told her that I'd already decided on a dress that I had envisioned myself wearing at my wedding. She got all angry because of it apparently, and then must have told my fiancé because he came home in the evening ranting about how I made his mom upset and turned down her help in choosing the wedding dress. He said I excluded her from the process. I asked what process? It's just a wedding dress. My wedding dress. So I really didn't get how she should get a say at all. He got upset and said that this attitude of mine isn't working on him or his mom. He said that I should consider the dress his mom wanted me to buy, especially knowing that both dresses weren't that much different anyway, like she said. But I told him that yes, they were different, like so much different. Anyways, we argued about it, then we dropped it. Yesterday, I came home and found that he had returned my wedding dress and replaced it with the one his mom wanted. I called him and he was straightforward about what he did and why he did it. I lost it and started screaming at him. He asked me to calm down and really give this dress a chance. I refused to even listen. I screamed at him without giving him a chance to speak. He got home and we had an argument. I then went to stay with one of my friends, and he kept calling and calling, then texting me, saying that I overreacted. He said it's his wedding too, so it wasn't cool how I screamed at him. He insisted I give this dress a chance. He went on and on about how his mom has a vision and good intentions, and just wants what's best for me as her future daughter-in-law. My mom is livid and has been wanting to go scream at him and his mom, but my dad said that this isn't worth ruining my relationship with my in-laws. He suggested I wise up and go with the flow. But is it too much for me to be able to pick my own wedding dress without being guilted about it just to keep the peace? Am I the jerk for my reaction? It's pretty obvious this original poster isn't the jerk here, although I'm admittedly a little stuck on how a wedding dress can be described as creepy. Even the dress in Corpse Bride was pretty hot, but it doesn't matter. She doesn't need any particular reason to hate the dress. She's the one who has to wear it, and she elaborated elsewhere that she's paying for it as well. That pretty much seals the argument. The fiancé and his mom sound awful, but I'd say the real jerks here are actually the workers at the bridal shop. There's no indication that this husband had any kind of receipt for the dress. More importantly, they shouldn't be sending home the dress that the mother-in-law picked without having the bride around to get it fitted. It's actually crazy that OP's first dress fit well enough to bring it straight home off the rack. That's not usually how dress shopping works for a wedding. If this is real, those employees owe this OP a serious explanation for why they thought this was okay. Grown man is way too into his glow-in-the-dark watch. Parts of the dial on my watch are luminous so that they're visible in the dark. It's quite common among higher-end timepieces, and it's essential for seeing the time, as well as being a neat party trick and conversation starter. The chromolite material recharges with UV light, so I carry a torch to recharge it. I was on an overnight flight this week, and when they dimmed the lights, I noticed the brightness was starting to fade. From experience, I knew it wasn't going to last the full flight, so I got out my UV torch as usual and started to recharge it. That's when the woman next to me started freaking out, screeching about how it was too bright and distracting her from whatever trash movie she was watching. It wasn't even that bright, and the light was focused on the dial, so I was surprised. I didn't want to escalate the situation, so I turned it away and tried to ignore her. This wasn't enough for her, however, so she called the flight attendant. I explained what I was doing and why, and it ended with me creatively putting it into a bag to recharge it in a way that kept the light hidden. Thankfully, this silenced her for the rest of the flight, and I managed to ignore her after that, other than mentioning the time quite loudly at one point so she knew I had recharged it. I was thinking about the incident again today and wondered whether I should have held my ground. Most commenters were pretty quick to vote this OP the jerk, but he's sticking to his guns. In the comments, his defense is that they need his awesome light-up watch to gather food and water if the plane crashes. He also says that if they get stranded, they'll need his watch to know when the sun's about to set. First off, you can tell when the sun's setting by looking at it. Second, in a situation where the sun hasn't set yet, you'd be able to see your watch without it glowing in the dark. This is either an elite troll or someone who's completely broken from reality. Most people don't associate glow-in-the-dark watches with high-end brands. He also has no idea what movie the woman was watching and never looked at her screen, yet assumes it was trash. Only one commenter seems to agree with him, and they suspiciously have the exact same writing style. I can't help but feel like this person started out as a troll, but somehow still took the "you're the jerk" votes personally enough to start making new accounts to defend themselves. And if this story is true, OP's the jerk, simply for announcing the time as if anyone cares that he managed to charge his chromolite. I used to have a Spider-Man watch that glowed. It's not that impressive. Shy couple skips their glow-in-the-dark wedding. My husband and I are both shy and introverted, and don't like big ceremonies. A few years ago, when discussing our future together, we both realized that neither of us wanted a wedding ceremony. We both hate being in the spotlight. However, both of our families are very traditional and would not recognize our marriage if we didn't have a ceremony. So my husband and I signed our papers and quietly got married. We decided to host a wedding of sorts so that our families would be appeased and accept our relationship. We decided we'd throw a wedding, but just not attend. We instead found strangers who looked like us online and paid them to go as us to the wedding. We had a glow-in-the-dark wedding theme, which my parents tolerated but weren't too happy about because they're against themed weddings. My husband and I arranged for there to be a bunch of black lights, but then tampered with most of them so that they wouldn't work and lighting would be minimal. It was almost pitch black so that our families wouldn't be able to see and thus would be none the wiser to the fact that my husband and I weren't actually there. We also said that we weren't feeling well and had come down with a cold, as an excuse to ask everyone to keep their distance from our lookalikes. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law apparently got too close and realized it wasn't actually my husband. She caused a scene and ruined things by telling everyone else. So am I the jerk for throwing an untraditional wedding and being upset at my mother-in-law for disrupting it? My family has been blowing up my phone and calling me a jerk for being dishonest. But I feel like I wouldn't have to have done this in the first place if my family would just recognize my wedding without a ceremony. I know I came down a little hard on glow-in-the-dark watches, but a glow-in-the-dark wedding sounds incredible. How could you come up with an idea that awesome and then just not go? The whole thing sounds like there's no way it happened. But if it did, then it sounds like so much work to throw a party you don't plan on attending. I especially find it strange that anyone would pay for black lights just to go and sabotage them. Wouldn't it be easier to just get fewer lights in the first place? If this is true, then it kind of feels like everybody's the jerk here. Any family members who won't recognize a marriage without a formal ceremony are terrible. Weddings cost money. It's ridiculous to assume that people want to pay that much for something they can just get at City Hall. That said, the family's right that this was incredibly dishonest, and unless every single member of both families was refusing to acknowledge their marriage, which is doubtful, then OP inevitably lied to at least some people who didn't deserve it. Those people then took time out of their day and possibly even bought new formal attire to attend a wedding that wasn't even real. What do you think? Is OP one of the jerks here, or would this fake wedding plan be justified? Give us your thoughts in the comments below. If you made it this far in the video, consider liking and subscribing for more videos coming. Trans Kevin keeps free bleeding in my bed. My boyfriend is a trans man, and I'm a cis female. We've been dating for 4 months and have just started spending nights with each other. So my boyfriend is a free bleeder. He believes that he doesn't need to wear any kind of sanitary product, and he also doesn't want to because they make him uncomfortable. which I could totally understand, but I'm not the biggest fan of the idea. But it's his body and his choice, so I support whatever makes him comfortable. A few weeks back, my boyfriend had spent the night at my house. He told me he wasn't feeling good from being on his period and wanted to be with me, so I invited him to stay the night. The next morning, I had woken up and he wasn't in bed. But there was a huge blood stain where he had been laying. I assumed he left to go wash up and grab new sheets to change the ones that had blood on them. When he came back, he was freshly showered and had his dirty clothes in a bag, but no new sheets or anything. I figured he'd go back for them after he put his clothes away, but he never actually did. And it's not like the stain wasn't noticeable, but he just went on with the rest of his day. Maybe he was embarrassed or something and didn't want to say anything, so when he left to go get food, I just changed the sheets and blankets. I washed the old ones, but I hadn't brought it up in conversation because I didn't want to make him feel bad. The only problem is that this kept continuing throughout the day. On my chairs and stools, my car seats, the toilet seat. I'm not one for confrontation, so I just cleaned it up wherever I found it. It hadn't happened for a while, but he recently spent the night again 3 days ago, and the same thing happened in my bed, and I saw it the next morning. He still didn't acknowledge it or anything, so when he went to shower, I changed the sheets again. When he got out of the shower, I asked him if we could talk. And that's when I asked him if he could stop free bleeding in my bed when he spends the night. I tried being as nice as possible, but he was ticked off at me for even bringing it up. He called me all kinds of names and told me I was a close-minded, selfish jerk for asking him to not be comfortable just because it makes a little bit of a mess in my bed. After he was done yelling, he grabbed all his things and left. He's been ignoring my texts and calls ever since. I'm scared to tell people I know because I don't want them to think less of him because of his reaction to what I asked of him. Am I really the jerk? Should I have just let it go and not said anything? Before even digging into this, it should be mentioned that free bleeding isn't nearly as common as its appearances on the internet. It started on 4chan, as best I can tell. That same site loves stories that make trans people into wild, screeching harpies, so it's no big surprise that the two tropes received a crossover episode. I'm actually surprised it took this long. I would have expected more stories like this around the time Baymax came out. In any case, it would take a complete doormat to think they might be the jerk for having a problem with someone just indiscriminately bleeding on all their furniture. Even if OP decided to allow that, it would still be the bleeder's job to clean it up. I know some people have trouble with confrontation, especially when it involves someone from pretty much any marginalized group. But part of treating someone equally is holding them equally accountable for basic human decency. If your boyfriend wants someone who will let him bleed all over the sheets and then clean it up for him, then let him keep looking until he finds that person. I'm sure there really is someone for everyone, although I doubt I'd want to see what his ideal match's hygiene is like. I told my nieces they were born to the wrong parents. This happened 2 months ago, and it still continues to this day. I have 5 siblings, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. My older brother, Chad, bullied and mistreated me from my early childhood, up until I moved out. He would scream at me constantly, telling me nobody loves me. He would regularly beat me. He turned the whole school against me, so nobody wanted to be my friend. I was lonely. In the beginning, my parents tried to brush it off as sibling rivalry. Later, in my high school, they tried to stop it, but it was already too late. When I was 16, Chad caught me making out with a boy. He outed me to everyone in school and all the family. I was bullied even more because of that. At 18, I moved out to college. I cut contact with Chad and started going to therapy to this day. I still have trauma from that time. I usually didn't come to family events because he was there. If I couldn't avoid it, like with birthdays for example, then I was usually hiding from him while I was there. I'm now big and ripped, like 2 times his size, but I still feel like a mouse in his presence. At one point, Chad turned his life around. He got married and now has 9-year-old twin girls. He reached out a lot in the past 15 years or so to make amends, and even my family tried to get us together. But I shut everything down. We can't have a relationship, period. Present day, I have a husband, and we're doing great in life. I also have 12 nibblings, but I don't have a relationship with Chad's kids. I'm just not interested in his family. Me and my husband shower the nibblings with gifts and trips all the time. This year, we plan to take 14 kids for a week at the beach camping resort. It would be 10 kids from my side of the family and 4 from my husband's side. We couldn't wait. A week before the trip, my father had a birthday and he organized a barbecue. All of the family and extended family were there. I guess the kids talked about how excited they were for the trip, and the twins heard. They came to me and, in front of everyone, asked why I don't want to be an uncle to them and take them with me. I told them that they were born to the wrong parents, and because of that, I will never be an uncle to them. They broke down and started crying. All my family started screaming at me. My sisters said that if the twins can't go, then their kids won't go either. All my brothers joined the ultimatum. So I said, fine, the trip is canceled for your kids, and I'll go with my partner's nibblings. All the other kids heard and were upset and started crying. It was a horror show. At that point, my husband and I just left. For the whole next week, I was bombarded with messages about how horrible a brother and uncle I am if I don't take them, even from my parents. I stood my ground. The trip happened with only 4 kids, and we had a blast. I feel sorry for my nibblings. They were just caught in the crossfire and were collateral. I haven't had contact with my family since. We have a family meeting tomorrow, but they won't like what they'll hear. So am I the jerk for canceling the beach trip for my nibblings because of an ultimatum? I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of 2 adults taking more than a dozen kids to the beach. Even 4 kids would be a lot, but 14 is just nuts. Honestly, I wouldn't blame OP if he'd canceled the trip because it was just plain too big an undertaking. As for the rest of it, telling 2 9-year-old girls they have a terrible father does seem a bit much. People don't change overnight, and I support a person cutting someone out of their lives if it's too hard to be around them. At the same time, the aptly named Chad was already trying to make amends for 6 years before the twins were born, so aiming that hatred at the kids now feels really misdirected. In the end, everyone except the twins were really victims of their parents more than anyone. That was a heck of an ultimatum for the parents to make, knowing that the kids would pay the price if they couldn't call OP's bluff. At the same time, OP says in the comments that he also plans on moving to another country to get away from the whole family forever. He also claims that he's been financially supporting every single person in the family for years. In a family this big, I'd love to know what OP does for a living. My guess is he's a fiction writer. What do you think? Do you support what OP said to the girls, or do you think it was out of line? Let us know in the comments how you'd handle this situation if you were in OP's fabulously wealthy shoes. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.